You too.
Welcome to our live stream audience, day 3 of Canada Reads. Hope everybody's doing well, getting passionately engaged in the books if you weren't already. It's, what do we have? We have about 5 minutes to chat. You get a little bit of behind the scenes. There was no behind the scenes of the behind the scenes. Let me just assure everyone, we were silent until right now. We do not speak until the cameras. I think some CBC listeners, viewers, might feel a little left out if they don't, if they're not privy to what we were talking about.
I mean, that's basically how it feels, where we can't hang out before, really, until we get to this table.
Right, right. This is our hangout.
We're kept in our cages until we're released.
Kept in our cages, yes.
It hasn't been too, like, I still feel this is very engaging because I was used to the last few years a table, everyone at the same table. So I thought we would be like, Scott, go long. You know, I really felt like it was going to be.
You're throwing your answers to me in tape show football.
Exactly. But no, it's not bad at all.
It doesn't feel like that at all.
No.
It does really feel really intimate
Yeah.
and personal, and I think it's like a lot to do with like how the backgrounds are addressed. You know, like you see
I
she's
think
in this
so.
black space with the blue behind her, and she's popping red. Like it's very dynamic, right?
It may also have to do with our desperation to just connect with people after the
Human
the
contact.
year. Exactly,
Definitely.
right? Maybe it's like, this is just good enough. Thank you. I'll take this. Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like there's enough eye contact too. When you kind of look around, I see you.
Yeah.
I see you.
Yeah,
I see you.
It's
I see you. Like, yeah.
You know, something very interesting happened day 1. I've had the exact opposite situation, Rosie. You're a broadcaster, so you looked at the camera as you are trained to do, and
Oh, my
I think
God.
people were like, "Oh, is she looking right at the camera?" Whereas I've done the opposite, where I am, you know, I'm brought in for like a CTV morning in Halifax or something like that, and then the host asks me something, and then I sort of look at the camera. And everyone's like, no, you look at the whole. Actually, I guess it's the same thing, as I've done the exact same thing,
Right,
thinking
you've
that.
looked at the camera.
Yeah, thinking
But-
that's
right.
what, let's have a, you know, I'm talking to the audience at home. But the
okay.
host does that.
Yeah,
The
it's
host does
true.
it right
Or
beside,
just
so I just took that
glued on the
cue.
camera. Like, where's the camera?
Right.
But in my defense, Oprah Winfrey did the same thing when she auditioned for The Color Purple.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, and Harpo.
Right.
What are you saying, Harpo? They're like, no, don't look at Harpo. But she got the job,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the Academy
Well,
Award
that's it.
nomination.
Yeah.
Sure, she had been years and years of that's ingrained before The Color Purple, right? I forgot about that.
Yep.
In my mind, I was like, oh yeah, she would have been acting and then
No.
gone to hosting. Not at
The
all.
other
She
way.
took a little break, to film that. People were like, it was like meeting an old friend the other day based on Twitter. I didn't get a chance to watch the interview with Meghan and Harry.
I
But
just
it's
was
like,
swallowing
people are
all
like,
of
it's
this
like putting on
stuff
an
in my
old-
dressing room before
Yeah.
I came out here.
Yeah.
I watched it as it aired, and I was just like, oh my God, we've missed you, Oprah.
Exactly.
She's
People
so
forget
good.
it seems
She's
to be the
so good at what she does. Were you silent or silenced?
Oh, so good. So
That
good.
was juicy.
That's funny because there's all these things, people are just quoting stuff.
Yep.
And I don't even know. So somebody said that,
Yep.
no quotations or anything. And in my head, I was like, I bet that's from the interview.
Yeah.
Right? I
Oprah.
have no context whatsoever, but people are just saying things that sound like they have depth and meaning. And I'm like, that's probably something Oprah said.
It's incredible, man. Awesome human.
Yeah, we forgot how good we had it with Oprah. She came back to remind us. We have a minute till we start. Devery, can you talk about those earrings by any chance? Are those
Oh,
by a
yeah.
designer that you know?
So these are the same designer. It's earrings by the same designer that I wore yesterday. So it's Warren Stephen Scott. And so all of the looks that I'm wearing this week are by Indigenous, Two-Spirit, or queer designers. So on Monday it was Indie City. Yesterday was Warren Stephen Scott. Today's Warren Stephen Scott. And tomorrow you'll just have to see.
We'll have to
Nice.
see. We'll have to look into it.
I love you
That's great.
representing. That's amazing. Isn't
Yeah, I think it's important. And also, I know that Joshua Whitehead has worn some earrings from Indie City as well. And so it's important. We have like beautiful jewelry and we got to represent on all fronts.
Absolutely.
it? So important. That's awesome.
Are these friends you had prior to the prior to this? or
Social
these are just people
media accounts that I follow. There's like Indian Twitter. There's like the native Instagram
There's Black
scene.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got
We
Black
have 10
Twitter.
seconds. We are coming in soon.
This is a CBC special presentation, available in described video.
It's day 3 of the Great Canadian Book Debate. We started with 5 great books, and we have said goodbye to 2 so far. 3 titles are still in the running. Which one will be the next to go? We'll find out today. I'm your host, Ali Hassan. This is Canada Reads.
This is Canada Reads, Canada's annual title fight.
Well, hello and welcome back. We've had 2 days of debate, 2 eliminations so far. There are 2 more votes to go. Casting those votes is this year's panel. They've all joined me once again in the Canada Reads studio. To my left is actor and comedian Paul Sun-Hyung Lee. Next to Paul is Olympian and broadcaster Rosie Etta. Next to Rosie and across from me in the Canada Reads circle is singer-songwriter, Juno-nominated Scott Hellman. And next to Scott is Mohawk actor and filmmaker Deborah Jacobs. And finally, sitting to my right is chef, TV host, and recording artist Roger Mooking. Before we get to today's debate, let's talk about what happened yesterday. We had a day of lively discussion, and the drama did not stop at the vote. It was a close vote. We said goodbye to The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. It was a fantasy novel championed by Rosie Etta. Rosie, I saw you sort of wiping fantastical tears just now. Tell us how you're feeling today.
I'm feeling a bit disappointed that I couldn't further the discussion about the book, but I've written something. I'd like to just share that. Can
Absolutely,
I do that?
Of course.
Nice. The joy of surprise, the joy of discovery, the joy of adventure, the joy of blossoming friendships, the joy of kicking off your heels, kicking up your skirt, and running free, the joy of stuffing your face with sweets and cake, the joy of love, the joy of triumph, the joy of standing in your truth in the midst of a harrowing storm, the joy of realizing you don't practice magic, you are magic. The Midnight Bargain, author C.L. Polk, you did your thing. You transported us to a fantastic world, and I and readers alike will revel in it for years to come. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Rosie. All right, we've said goodbye to Two Trees Make a Forest and The Midnight Bargain. Let's turn now to the books that are still in contention for Canada Reads 2021. Today we're going to play the trailers for each of the books still in the running, and then the panelist who is championing that title will get 60 seconds to make their opening statement. The pandemic has been a difficult time in this country. We've talked about that this week, and there is a lot of stuff that we can learn from these books about getting through tough times. The protagonists in all these books model resilience. So today, the question for your opening statement is this: how does your book make the reader believe that everything will be okay? We're going to go around the table, clockwise like always. Paul, you've been going first all week, but since Hench is still in the running, I think it's been working for you. You're championing Hench by Natalie Zena Walshots. Let's listen to the trailer.
Anna is a hench. She crunches data for supervillains. It's just office work, a way to pay the bills. But when she gets injured on the job, because of the biggest superhero in town, she gets mad. How many other people have been hurt by superheroes? How many jobs lost? Homes destroyed? Lives ruined? Anna decides to find out and discovers that superheroes aren't so super after all. She becomes a hench on the rise, working for the baddest villain of all. How far can she climb? How far will she fall?
Paul, 60 seconds are on the clock. How does Hench make the reader believe that everything will be okay?
Hench is not a feel-good novel that ends with us all joining hands and dancing around a bonfire with a group of Ewoks singing Yub Nub. But if you're ever going to be in a crisis situation where the stakes are high and your life is on the line, you'll want a character like Anna Tremedloff on your side. She's a character that has been forged through the fires of adversity and hardship brought upon her by the world's greatest superhero, whose mission to protect and serve gives him the license to maim and destroy. And that's just what he does to her life. But she recovers because she is determined, resourceful, fierce, and a true leader. Her ability to focus her rage and use her intelligence to tackle problems head on is a true tale of empowerment. And like the best villains in the pantheon of villainy, Anna's most formidable weapon is her mind. This makes her an indispensable ally and a fearsome enemy. So, if the world's greatest superhero can't bring her down, why worry?
Thank you, Paul. All right, Devry, with the midnight bargain and two trees make a forest eliminated, that means that you are next. But don't count out Rosie or Scott. As we saw yesterday, their votes are very important. You're championing Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. Here's the trailer.
Johnny Appleseed is an Indian glitter princess. That's what he calls himself. He left the res and is now living in the city. He pays his bills with sex work. Things are tough, but Johnny's tougher. His community in the city is small but tight-knit. But when his stepfather dies, it's time to return to the res. Face his memories, his history, his mother. Because looking back is the only way forward. And love is what he needs most. It's there, if he opens himself up to it.
Devry, you have 60 seconds. How does Johnny Appleseed make the reader believe everything will be okay?
Growing up, my mom always said, if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry. No one will say that Johnny Appleseed is without his darkness. Hell, Indigenous people aren't without darkness. But the common thread between us all is our unwavering resilience. Yes, there's abuse, there's addiction, there's so much death, but Johnny is loved and is even more loving. Despite all odds, Indigenous people are still here. We're survivors, and you know damn well that we use humor as a coping mechanism. Johnny Appleseed has been through hell and back, but this book isn't depressing. It exists in multitudes. It's the hurt and the beauty and everything in between. Johnny isn't looking for your pity. He's looking for you to heal alongside him. In its final pages, Johnny says, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love the noise, the liveliness of voices that are laughing, arguing, bingo calling, and telling stories in a two-packed home. In fact, I'd say that's my world. And Johnny Appleseed tells us that this world is gonna be okay.
Thank you, Devry.
Right on.
Roger, still last, but still here.
Imagine that.
Yeah, good sign. Well, we'll see if it is. You're championing Butter Honey Pig Bread by Francesca Equiasi. Here's the trailer.
3 Nigerian women, a mother, Kambirinachi, and her twin daughters, Kehinde and Taye. Kambirinachi was born an Ogbanje, a spirit, a soul who causes misfortune and misery to all she loves. Kehinde and Taye are sisters connected by fate, separated by trauma, driven apart, cast to different corners of the world. But an appetite for food, a sprinkling of faith, and an abundance of love sets the table for togetherness, healing, and forgiveness.
Roger, you have 60 seconds. How does Butter Honey Pig Bread make the reader believe everything will be okay?
You know, being okay and okayness is really about resilience, right? And this book is resilient and it's steeped in hope. You have to first envision being okay to be able to start walking towards okayness. You have to imagine that. So Taye writes letters to her estranged sister after a major traumatic family event that split the family apart in her method of reaching out to seek hope and okayness again. Kehinde is analyzing her own trauma, internalizes it around the same life-changing event, and she's reluctant to communicate, but she's on a path of transformation the whole time. Kambirinachi is tortured by these powerful two forces, and ultimately she is okay. Simultaneously, they're all processing the death of a father, a husband, and of children and sisters, right? So this is what we all do. You know, I've lived long enough to realize that we're all walking up a mountain with a boulder strapped around our waists. And all we have to do is either grind it down so it's manageable, get stronger to lift it, or cut the rope. But we're all hopeful that we'll see that okayness someday, right?
Thank you, Roger. All right, panelists, it's time to debate. We just heard Paul, Devery, and Roger's compelling opening statements about how the books that they're championing help readers believe things will be okay. So, what did you think about those arguments? Scott, let me start with you.
About which book, or do I just...
I mean, the arguments, all three arguments that you heard, what sticks out and what makes you, what do you feel about what you heard?
I have trouble with the butter honey pig bread, with the argument brought up with butter honey pig bread. This is the argument that really stood out to me, was that I feel like a character like Taye, for instance, but I feel this way for all the characters. You know, when the argument's brought up, like that her writing these letters was an act of, you know, resilience and trying to find hope, it's hard for me to connect with that because these letters were never intended to be read. And so what that conveys to me is that this character went through a traumatic experience and held on to resentment and trauma, and instead of reaching out and connecting, you know, sort of packed it all in and held on to it. And I feel like that's a big theme in this book, which is what makes the book beautiful, because that's a very human experience. But at the same time, it's like I don't know if I want to read that. I want to read about people that are like trying to fix things. And there were points in this book where I was like, really just hoped for the characters to do that and connect and, you know, move past these things. And yeah, it just felt like that moment happened at the end. It happened really quickly, and it took a long time to get there. And there were just a lot of the book was me just wanting for that to happen or feel like it was getting somewhere. So that's kind of my criticism of that point. And
Roger, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, it's like I look at the letter writing thing as a diary. You know, you write songs for a living, and part of writing songs is processing your own emotions and documenting it. But also you're trying to process the emotions for your audience, right? Some people may not have the talent, the skill, the acumen to be able to write a song to explain the way they feel.
Sure.
And so they look to artists to do that, to be able to feel that and go, oh, I can relate to that situation. But sometimes this is a very insular experience.
But the central part of me making art is sharing that art with people.
I understand
and
that.
if I held on to all my songs, it would be of no value to anyone.
I do understand that, right? But sometimes you need to bring that insular so you can process it. And as you try to process it, yeah, I believe her intent was always to share it at some point.
That's never conveyed to me in the book.
But she knew her sister was so reluctantly to engage with her throughout the years after that incident that she needed to resolve it for herself. And I believe that she had the imagination one day she would share it. It came out eventually, but she also needed to get to a place where her sister would even return her phone calls or communicate with her, respond to her emails. So to me, that is like longing, reaching hope. I'm gonna do this, documenting this for myself, but one day I imagine that she will get these and they will mean something to her. And that's exactly what happened, right?
Let me turn to you for a second, Devery. I saw you had a reaction to
The
that.
bigger takeaway, and I also agree with what Scott was saying, the bigger takeaway, while yes, they do come together at the very end, I thought that Butter Honey Pig Bread was more an observation of trauma and how it affects this family and how they all diverted to their own defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms, and that intersection of it. I didn't see Taye's agency in overcoming this with her sister. In fact, she was actually more passive, and she was just waiting to be forgiven. So I didn't read that as resilient.
I disagree. I think that her methodologies were different, right? So where the letter writing was her insular methodology, her external methodology was food. Right? And this is why I love food, because food is so central, it's so primal, and it's such a point of communication. I don't even need to talk to you to express to you how much I love you because I made your favorite thing. I don't have to tell you, hey, Scott, I made your favorite thing because I love you. You know, just by the simple act of living through that food and telling that story, making that thing that they love so much and sharing that with them, that is her ability and her method for outreach.
There was some warmth in that, though. There was some warmth and some strength in that, and just the way in which each and every one of us independently, uniquely deal with horrible trauma. It's all unique. There's not one of us that would react in exactly the same way. And so I felt that that did have a strength and a warmth to it that I needed to get through that. And so I will say that the letter writing and then the way in which that the author would tie in the letter writing plus the food gave me some comfort, gave me a lot more comfort than I thought it would. A lot more comfort than I thought. I know that that's not the main crux of it, but there was some stability and some comfort within the instability and the horrendousness of some of that trauma that I was able to hold on to and to absorb and to carry me through the story.
Well, Rosie, let me ask you about Hench, because as it has just sort of happened, we never really got to get your opinion about Hench this week. And I really wanted to get at least a little bit of opinion about the variety of books that are still left, all three of them. What were your thoughts on Hench and its ability to make the reader feel everything's going to be okay?
Her body was broken a couple of different times, horrendously so, and that was to further exemplify the strength of that superhero and to understand the differences in henches and regular folk and superheroes, and to exemplify the destructive nature of the heroes, which I thought was pretty ingenious to take a look at henches as opposed to superheroes. And I really like the point that Paul made about those so-called do-gooders who come in and just wreak so much havoc and destruction. And you equated it in some cases to law enforcement. They want to do good, but sometimes they end up shooting somebody who's running away. Sure. And the person dies. And so I found that was an interesting equation.
I actually thought that Hench was like the story of how these supervillains and these henches are like so resilient that it kind of turns into revenge. And that was what Super Collider was actually saying to Anna, where he's like, I should have basically offed you when I had the chance, because it's like these people who I have hurt or whatnot, like end up becoming so resilient that they become superheroes. He was the one who wronged Leviathan so much that he was so resilient that he became this supervillain and like Super Collider's greatest nemesis. So I thought that was an interesting, where I don't know if it was precisely resilience, but it was resilience that had been harbored and cared for so much that it turned into revenge.
And resilience comes in a lot of different ways. There's a physical resilience, there's mental resilience. And what I really admired about Anna was, even though her body was broken, instead of just folding in on herself and feeling sorry for herself and feeling like the victim that she was, she focuses, and she's absolutely motivated by revenge, this anger, but instead of letting it explode around her, she focuses it on the one individual that is not being held accountable for the situation she's in. And this passion, this anger is focused in a way for positive, in a sense, a positive sort of outcome, because when you
According
actually pull, she pulls the curtain away from the actual harm that's being done. And that is her interpretation of it. But the cool thing is, the more she speaks about it and the more the math adds up, the more people who have the same story start to step up. And you have an entire community of people who've never been listened to, who've been discounted because, hey, you know what? You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're superheroes. Deal with it. You have lives that have been broken and forgotten about and shuffled under the rug, suddenly finding agency. And they're doing the unpopular thing, which is standing up against these supposedly good organizations.
That is it for this round. No need to feel bad, Paul. It was you got it all out. You got it. You looked a little broken at the end. That was great. You made some great points. All right, each of these three books still in the running immerse us in specific and different communities. They all feature very different characters going through unique experiences. So I want to ask you this for this round. Which book helped expand your understanding of an experience outside your own? Rosie, let's start with you.
Which book helped expand my understanding? Wow.
Of an experience you had not had or
Yes.
you were not familiar with?
Yes. Wow, that's a great question. I think that they all did, in their own ways, help expand my understanding in different aspects of this world, dealing with horrendous trauma, dealing with a life of just isolation. I would say that Hench helped me understand a little bit more about a broken body and a body that just basically doesn't work for you anymore because of through no fault of your own, but through other people, and how you have to just simply rely on your own mind. And I vividly remember Anna on the couch at her best friend's house, starting to devise this whole plan of data crunching, and I thought that was fascinating. How she was immobile, but her mind was still working, and it was still very, very agile. So to be laid up like that without any use, really, you're and in absolute pain as well, and to still have the wherewithal to use your mind in a productive way, and not be completely taken by, a tablet with maybe, Instagram and watching videos, which is what so many of us do when we're bored or when we're at home and we're tired and we don't want to get up. What do? You just sit and, you just watch inane videos. I was impressed at how she trained her mind to do that, how she found that little hole, that little caveat, and created that world within her mind. I'm so fascinated by characters who create a world within their own mind, especially when they're isolated and can't go anywhere.
Scott, let me ask you the same question. I see you scribbling reasonably furiously over there. I feel like, unless that's your latest hit that you're
That is my latest hit, yeah.
Stay focused, Scott.
The same question, which is?
Well, the question is, which book helped to grow your understanding of an experience that was not your own?
They all did, truthfully. They all did. So much. It's, to me, it's really a matter of squabbling over degrees of difference. The two that did the most for me were Johnny Appleseed and Butter Honey Pig Bread. I loved Butter Honey Pig Bread for the dimension of the characters. That's what I loved about the book. And for me, because it was such a humanist book, I loved the dynamics of the characters. Johnny Appleseed felt a little bit more like a singular character study, which has its own value and is great. But in terms of reflecting on the experiences of others, that aren't mine, I see the value in Butter Honey Pig Bread in just of the multitude of perspectives. And I think that's the thing that's really valuable right now. And so I really appreciated that about Butter Honey Pig Bread.
While I agree where Butter Honey Pig Bread definitely brought me to Lagos, brought me to England, brought me to different places in the world and have different sensory experiences with food. And I did love the book, as well as Hench, what it means to be an able-bodied person. But what I found in Butter Honey Pig Bread that actually bothered me was that I felt like it wasn't evenly distributed, because it felt like Tai was the main character because so much of Kehinde's writing was Tai's letters. And so in Johnny Appleseed, you have this full body experience and get to fully feel the character, whereas in Butter Honey Pig Bread, I either wanted it to be completely in Tai's perspective or I wanted it to be more evenly balanced between them. And similarly to what Paul had mentioned, either yesterday or on the first day, where when you read it and it switches, you're in the third person for the first chapter. With Taya, you're in the third person, but then when you switch to Kehinde, you're in the first person, and it felt jarring. It felt like a different book. And so for me, it didn't feel evenly distributed, so I felt like I couldn't connect to it as much because the characters weren't evenly balanced for me.
Well, what's interesting about that is that's what I find it truly fascinating and majestic about this book, right? There's a concept called Ubuntu. Is everybody familiar with what Ubuntu is? Ubuntu is a concept in African folklore where they say, I am because we are, right? Meaning that I am we, meaning that we are a community of people. Right now, we are a community of people, and we're all connected as a community. So the whole premise of this book, one of the major premises of the book, is to state, yes, this is not a singular perspective, because this is about kin. This is about all of us, right? And then she says, I am more massive than you can imagine. right? So it brings you into this warm, enveloping hug to say, look, this is the world that we're inhabiting. It may be outside of your world, but it's inclusive of all of us because of Ubuntu, right? I am because we
Absolutely.
are. And that's the exploration. It's not a singular character exploration.
And that's
it's
totally
an exploration
fair.
of the community.
But then I would have liked to have evenly, like, have heard evenly from Kembrianachi and Kehinde as, because it really did feel like Tai was the protagonist.
Paul, let me give the final word to you in this round.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. It did feel like, even though it was like, it's beautifully written.
It's
first of all.
beautiful.
I love the characters and the relationships within it. But if I was to actually debate about which book made me experience something that was outside, I mean, Johnny Appleseed nailed it for me. It was eye-opening. It was devastating. It was one of these hard looks that you have to make that is so truly not my experience. And I felt like I learned a tremendous amount from it, from the trauma and through how to deal with it. The resiliency of Johnny is just, it's outstanding. Butter Honey Pigbread for me, though, was, we talk about love and we talk about forgiveness, and they're two separate things in that book too, and it's heartbreaking too, that entire journey, because they're together and they're not speaking to each other. There's a lot being unsaid, and who knows if they would have reconciled if the letters had never been sent accidentally, which was, it's great, but it felt like a bit of a plot device for me. It works, but it just felt a little plotty to me. And the thing is too, it's a familiar dynamic. It really is, in terms of that family, like coming from an Asian family, you get a lot of slights that sort of happen, and people never talk about it. And they go on and they show that they love each other, but nobody ever says sorry. And that, in the end, with Butter Honey Pigbread, you get that. But if you're talking about a transformative, sort of an eye-opening experience, I mean, for me, it was Johnny Appleseed that sort of really made me experience something different.
It was also...
We'll have to leave it there. Devery, thank you very much, guys. That's it for this round.
It was an experience other than my own also, because I'm not a femboy and I don't experience the same kind of homophobia against feminine men.
I think, Paul, also, as a self-professed nerd, you've said you're a nerd. I think you were still able to nerd out on your own.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love it, but it's, yeah.
All right, panelists, Canada Reads is a marathon. We are nowhere near the finish line. Rosie, I hope you're appreciating these running metaphors. We asked the authors of the books you are championing for a late-in-the-race pep talk.
Tanzania Totem, hi Devery. I just need to first and foremost say thank you so much. I'm watching with love and tear as you defend Johnny with such grace and such deadliness. I don't think I've ever seen a two-spirit novel on the stage of Canada Reads before, specifically one that's femme, unabashed, queer, sexy, powerful, but painful, and full of a whole lot of glitter. And as Johnny says, you're gonna need a rock and a whole lot of medicine. I also want to reiterate that you've ground us into a medicine, and in there, go Wounded Knee, don't break a leg.
Hi, Roger. First of all, thank you so much for championing my book with such incredible passion. It means so much to me how clearly you see this work and what I'm trying to do. You're doing such an amazing job, and I couldn't have asked for a more fitting champion. Thank you.
Paul, listening to you champion Hench these last days has been an absolute joy. Your enthusiasm, your insightful analysis, and your genuine passion has moved me every single day. I am so thrilled that you are here defending and standing up for and supporting Hench.
Those were the voices of the authors with books still in the running: Joshua Whitehead, Francesca Equiasi, and Natalie Zeno-Walshotz. I'm Ali Hassan. This is Canada Reads on CBC and SiriusXM. Let's get back to the debate. Well, we've heard the term accessibility come up a fair amount this week, and I want to turn to that concept in this debate round. What do you think makes a book accessible to readers, and how successful are these books at doing that? So, Devery, I'm going to start with you on this question.
For sure. I think that there's a number of different ways that a book can be accessible. Firstly, like financially, I'm just gonna go there. Like Johnny Appleseed is the shortest. It's also the least expensive of all of the books in Canada Reads. It's financially accessible. And as someone, if someone is not really a reader and you look through the chapters, they're not intimidating because the chapters are so much shorter. And so for me, that's like one of the reasons why it could be accessible. And also like it's talking about queerness. There's recent studies that over half of Gen Z don't identify as straight. So there is such a need for Two-Spirit and indigiqueer novels. But I think a reason why Johnny Appleseed also provides like some invitations to the audiences is making it fun and accessible. Like there's a moment where Johnny says, "We stood at the bar and we danced to Britney Spears' Work, Bitch." As the beats grew more intense and Britt asked if we wanted a Maserati, Tia started grinding his hips against mine. Like everybody knows where we were when Britney Spears was there and we all know the song, so it's an invitation into this specific world, but also making a project as specific as possible ends up making it universal. If you look at projects like Moonlight, if you look at Minari, these are specific to these cultures and these experiences, and I feel like that's what Johnny Appleseed does, and for me, that's why I feel like it's accessible. And if I were to talk about your books, I think that what makes it accessible would be the food and that point of entry where everybody loves the meal. And for Butter Honey Pig Bread and then for Hench, it's obviously because it's superheroes and it's a take that we haven't seen yet. But for me, and the reasons that I listed before, that's what makes Johnny Appleseed the most accessible.
Paul, let me ask you the same question. How successful are these books at being accessible to readers?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a bit of a slam dunk for Hench just because it is ostensibly about superheroes, but it's also a reason why it shouldn't be discounted or easily dismissed. I mean, one of the wonderful things about Hench is the cast of characters that are in there. They are inclusive, they are diverse. You have characters that have different ethnicity, different sexuality, different gender identity, different abilities. And they're all, what I love about it as a person of color is that they're all just that. They're not defined by the one identifier. They are more than that. They're more than just a checklist of characters that are just sort of thrown in there. It's organically written, they're believable, and it's just a matter of fact. And I find that refreshing as somebody who has to make a living in an industry where those identifiers are important. And that's the goal that you want to get to. You want to get to a point where none of that should matter, but we're not there yet. And what I also love about Hench is because it is a genre novel, it is accessible to anybody who wants to read a great story, but it's a great way of looking at our own stories. It's a great way of looking at exploring our own environment, our habits, our morals, and societal injustices because it's through a different lens. And that makes it more palatable for people because they don't take it personally then. And they can look at it, but it does bring up all these issues that are relevant and that run deep within us. And so I think I would feel comfortable handing out Hench to anybody of any age to say, read this book if you want a good story and you want to be able to think about it afterwards.
Roger, what are your thoughts on accessibility of these books and what you've just heard here?
You know, I think like from a genre, like a demographic piece, right? Hench is like a very specific niche audience of people who are going to be looking for superhero novels, right? And although I don't disagree that there are some very relatable elements and moments in it, I find that I'm missing some of the nuance because superhero forces your imagination, but the gateway to imagination for each person is different. What I may seem as a plausible impossible, Scott's imagination may not veer there, right? So the relativism to the approachability of that book is coming from very different places. Whereas I find with like Butter Honey Pig Bread, for instance, the food, again, I come back to the food not only because I'm a chef, and this is not my major takeaway from the book actually, but the food is so central to it. Food is primal. We don't need superheroes to live. You need food and water to live, right? The sex in this book is primal. These are like primal physiological urges. And the seeking of love and hope in this book is accessible. So we have food, we have wild, passionate sex where you're burning the food because you can't be distracted from it, and you have seeking love. Every human being is seeking love. Charles Manson was just seeking love. He just had a little demented approach around it. But
What is this
No,
argument?
but listen, everybody is just seeking love.
Keep going. Hey, you know what? But you know, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about people want to dismiss hench because it is superheroes. You say, well, it caters to a very specific set. I could argue the same thing with Butter Honey Pig Bread. If you want accessibility, if you drop these books down and say, well, which one do you want to read? There are people who are like, well, I don't want to go down that wonderful journey where we talk about, I'm not a chef, the food doesn't interest me. That's a niche market. You can make those.
I actually agree with you.
If
Even
it
though I
were-
brought up a lot of things about hench, if we're talking about accessibility, like superhero movies are the highest box office selling movies. That I can't think of a genre of movie that doesn't isn't more mainstream.
Yeah.
So
If these were
it
both
is a
made
weird
into
argument to
movies.
say that food versus superheroes. I don't know.
But you say superheroes, but if you look at Food Network and if you look at television programming, broadcasting programming, what has weathered the storm of online coming on board has been live sports and Food Network.
I don't know.
But if
There's
these
a
were
whole
both to be
MCU,
made
the
into
Marvel
movies,
Cinematic Universe.
statistically,
you've
If
got
these were to be
Disney
made into
Yeah.
movies, this would be a blockbuster.
You're talking about hench,
I'm
specifically,
talking-
right?
I'm
Yeah.
talking about hench. If this were to be made into movies, hench would be a blockbuster, whereas Butter Honey Pig Bread would be an A24 indie film,
100.
which is beautiful, and it is a beautiful story. But I don't know that it's as accessible to the masses as hench would be.
And it was
if we were to
interesting because
compare.
people said that about Roots with Alex Haley when Roots dropped, and Roots was super accessible.
Yeah, and there's
to a
something
lot
about
of
the
people.
Marvel Universe, which I love and I'm a massive fan of, but I'm just wondering about the box office numbers, and does it represent everybody just because it made $1 billion zillion, or does it mean that there's a return? There's people going and seeing it 5, 6, 7 times because they love it so much.
Just before we
how
wrap,
many people...
Rosie, let me let you dive in on the books rather than the box office numbers. Let me ask you the final question because we didn't get to hear from you in this round. The accessibility of these books, was there one that stuck out and you thought was more accessible to readers?
I thought that I felt warmth when I read Honey Butter Pig Bread. I felt there was this warmth, something that was difficult to sort of articulate, but there was so that means that it's inviting. You know, when you open the door, it's cold outside and it's warm, you're drawn in. So I felt an inherent warmth to Honey Butter Pig Bread. For hench, it was cheeky. It was witty. I felt like I had a smirk. There was a smirk that the author had when she was writing it, going, ha ha ha. Okay, come on, you guys. You know you want in on this story. So there was so much. Even when she uses the crutches, and she was playing and she was toying and like a crafty artisan, and then Johnny Appleseed was like, so this is the story, this is how it's going to be, and the door's open. Are you ready? Are you brave enough to step in? That and with that such absolute strength. So yeah, so I'm sitting here telling you they were all in their own ways going, this one was like, the door's just open and you're just drawn in. This one was like,
Rosie.
I dare you
That's
to come in. This
very
one was like,
well-rounded,
yeah, it was fun.
diplomatic way to end that session. That is it for that round.
So hard.
We started today by talking about the resilience and hope in each of these books. And often resilience and hope come from experiencing difficult things. And each of these books explores how trauma or violence can impact our lives. I want to explore that in this round of debate. Which book's exploration of trauma was the most powerful for you? Scott, let me start with you.
Exploration of trauma for me was Johnny Appleseed. I mean, before I read that book, I would have called myself an ally of two-spirited folk, and I was, but now I have allyship with Dimension. I understand that struggle in a way that I didn't before, and that's something that is a gift. I think for an author to be able to do that is the feat of this kind of literature. So I feel that in that book, I I was shown this trauma. The thing I love so much about Johnny's character is the pain eater aspect of it, which is, I feel like what fell short for me in Butter Honey Pig Bread. It was like, here's a character that's taking all of this stuff, this trauma, and is like regurgitating love. And that's a story I know I want to read, and that I think is so useful for this time. Outside of also the realm of how Johnny identifies, like, I think for all of us at this time is like such a hard time for the world, for Canada. And to read a story about someone that's taking trauma and turning it into love, I mean, like, I don't know. To me, that really resonates with me. And so in the category of violence and trauma, Johnny Appleseed for sure, I think, worked for me.
How about yourself, Rosie?
How the authors explain trauma, the explanation of trauma was just masterfully done in Johnny Appleseed. It was just, even such minute details like going to the corner store and buying like these things that would sustain them only just, like some sort of a Kool-Aid or something, and just cobbling together this pseudo meal and making something out of it and ingesting it and then going on to live another day. The trauma about just the isolation and the strength in just walking your own path without much support at times was traumatic, I thought. And yet he was able to, well, he's a pain eater, so he was able to eat it and then come out with something else. Again, it's that stark truth that is the strength of the author, and again, in my opinion, where I feel it faltered. And again, it is such a beautiful novel. It's so powerful.
Rosie, would you want to, sorry, Debbie, would you want to respond to that, what both of your panelists have said?
Yeah, I can see, I remember you mentioning yesterday that you thought that was one of the negatives about the book, that it was almost too personal for you, but I really believe that there is strength and vulnerability. And like, as an actor, as a musician, like, that's demanded of us in our work, but
I didn't think it was too personal. I didn't think it was too personal. No.
Okay, I just thought it was like, you said it was too private, where like the sips of water is what you were mentioning, and that was one of your arguments yesterday, but I do think that vulnerability is a superpower, and that's the driving force behind Johnny Appleseed. I think, I also remember yesterday, and it was something that had resonated with me when you had mentioned in Butter Honey Pig Bread that you were affected and you were exhausted by seeing the trauma of Black women, and I can wholeheartedly empathize with that. I also feel similarly with queer and Indigenous people that we need fewer stories of trauma and that we need more stories of love and healing.
Amen.
And I feel that while Johnny Appleseed also did express copious amounts of trauma, that it was actually done more successfully by finding the beauty in it than Butter Honey Pig Bread was. If I think of the memory that Johnny has, where Tias and him had painted their nails sparkly, but then Tias's father came home and he cut his nails too short where they were bleeding and raw, and in a private moment, Johnny takes his hands and he sucks on his fingers, and it's very private, it's very intimate, and it catches you off guard, but it's also so powerful, and Joshua is masterful at being able to combine the pain, the heartbreak, and the heartwarming side of these memories, and that's why I thought that it was more complex in dealing with the trauma, and also lifted my spirit a bit more, and looking at it as a whole picture as opposed to just focusing in on trauma porn.
Roger, what are your thoughts on
You know,
this?
it's really interesting that you say trauma porn, because
it didn't fully do that. I think that was the wrong word, but there were traumatic moments in it.
Definitely there are traumatic moments, but you use the word trauma porn, right? And the thing is like, think of where we are in time right now. We're going through COVID. Every single person that I know knows somebody who has nearly died from COVID, has had to hold the hand, through a nurse, holding the hand of their loved one as they die by themselves inside of a hospital. Their children die. Like, this is the time that we're living in, right? And that happens on a viral level, but also when that person dies with the nurse holding their hand, there's a fallout around the entire family that creates an avalanche of mental health issues, okay? So I give you a sensibility. You talk about trauma porn, and I find that it diminishes what trauma is. I tell you, like, my family has been through so much trauma, right? Me and my wife have had to bury 2 of our children. I've watched my grandmother die in a mental hospital in Trinidad, right? I've watched family members of mine in every decade of my life go through crisis of mental health. I'm talking call the hospital, get them in the ambulance, we're like all hands on deck, right? So trauma is not pornography. Trauma is a real thing, and it happens to people. How do you resolve this? How do you get around this and through this, right? So she says this, but I must remember that the flip side of that pain was a gift through that grief. I birthed the version of myself who creates. And I tell you, when we had to bury our children, okay? And I'm not saying this I really hate to explain this, but this is just the lowest of the low of the depths of trauma for me in my life, right? Mm-hmm. And from a relatability standpoint, I didn't see the light. There was no hope. It was the worst, most hollow thing ever for me, my wife, my kids had to experience this thing, right? And so to have to kind of lift yourself up out of that, you have to say, I have to birth a new version of myself. Everything I thought about the world, about morality, fairness, be kind to people in the world will return it to you. Everything just demolished in 1 second. Right?
Roger, with no
you have
disrespect,
to rebuild yourself.
I have to leave it there, brother, so we can move on. That is it for today's debate.
I do think trauma porn was the wrong word, and as soon as I said it, I knew that it wasn't the proper thing. But
my friends, it's time to vote, and we can have this
for
conversation.
your loss.
We definitely should have this conversation, but we do have to put some X's down on those ballots in front of you.
Wow.
Please mark an X beside the book that you want to eliminate from the competition. Once you have voted, Lucy Mann from the Canada Reads team will take your ballot. Which title will be eliminated today? And which of the 2 books will head into the final round tomorrow? Will it be Hench by Natalie Zena Walshots? That's the novel that Paul Sun-Hyung Lee is championing. Will it be Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead? Devery Jacobs is championing that title. Or will it be Butter Honey Pig Bread by Francesca Equiasi? That book has been backed by Roger Mooking this week. Whichever one it is, it will join Two Trees Make a Forest by Jessica J. Lee and The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. Two Trees Make a Forest was eliminated on day 1. That was the book championed by Scott Hellman, and The Midnight Bargain was eliminated yesterday on day 2. It was championed by Rosietta. All right, while we're waiting for these results to come back to us, I did want to say, I thought with the pandemic, this might not be taking place. One of the most beautiful things about Canada Reads is the engagement all across this country at libraries, in people's homes, and in various different community centers. So I just wanted to say the Bibliothèque Lennoxville Library, where I went in person last year before Canada Reads, they had their annual Canada Reads debate. They didn't let the pandemic stop them. They had it as a Zoom event. The St. Albert Public Library in Alberta did the same thing, kept their tradition alive that they started 6 years ago. Argo Bookshop, a bookshop in Montreal that's been around since 1966, hosted an online event with Francesca and Natalie and CL. And all the Canada Reads books are bestsellers. I think it's a good reminder, good time to remind us all that is something wonderful that's happening in the world of literature, and that almost always happens in this world. Thank you so much. Lucy has given me the ballots. All right, I have the ballots at hand. A reminder once again that there are no secret ballots on Canada Reads. Roger Mooking, tell us which book did you vote against?
Johnny Appleseed.
Just 1 vote against Johnny Appleseed. Devery Jacobs, how did you vote today?
I voted against Butter Honey Pig Bread.
It's 1 vote against Butter Honey Pig Bread. Paul Sun Hyung Lee, what book did you vote to eliminate today?
Butter Honey Pig Bread.
We have 2 votes against Butter Honey Pig Bread. Scott Hellman, how did you vote?
I voted against Hench.
We have 1 vote against Hench, 1 vote against Johnny Appleseed, and 2 votes against Butter Honey Pig Bread. Rosietta, the deciding vote lies in your hands. How did you vote today?
I voted against Hench.
It's 2 votes against Hench and 2 votes against Butter Honey Pig Bread. That means we have a tie. We went through this yesterday, but we will go through it again. Let's turn our attention to the Canada Reads rulebooks to understand what we do.
We have a tie. The panelist who did not vote against either of the books up for elimination must break the tie. This is the case even if that panelist is defending one of the 2 books up for elimination.
That means it's up to you, Roger. The 2 books that you have to decide between are Hench and Butter Honey Pig Bread. We probably all see where this is going, but I'm going to ask you to say it out loud in any case. What book should be eliminated?
Hench.
Hench has been eliminated from Canada Reads. We have a few minutes here, and Paul, you've been a terrific champion of this book, and you are incredibly articulate in describing a book that is essentially about superheroes and supervillains, and you made a case for why it should be here at the table. How are you feeling right now?
Honestly, I feel a little bit disappointed for Natalie. Sorry, let you down. But
You didn't let her down.
No.
No,
you did
thank
great.
you.
No,
Thanks.
did not let her down.
Thank you. This has been a crazy experience. It's been like lots of highs, lots of lows. This has been an anchor for me this week. I loved chatting with all of you about these books. I love your passion. I love how smart and intelligent and articulate you guys are. Not you guys, I'm sorry, I didn't want to use that. How articulate everyone here is. Ali, you're a fantastic host.
Let's not make this about me, huh?
Yeah. Hench is you know what, and you're right. Hench already wins by being here. And hopefully I've changed some minds at home for the viewers, for people who otherwise dismiss genre novels. They're deeper than you think. I think they deserve more credit in literary circles. I'm proud to have championed it. And I'm actually a little bit relieved because this was such a stressful process of having to go up against this fantastic book. I feel like now I can sit back and just wreak havoc. So thank you.
That would have been my next question.
Awesome.
What do you do as a freelance, free agent here? And wreak havoc is maybe a summary, but
I came in today with a different. Honestly, I thought I was going to vote a different way today, and listening to the arguments opened my mind, and I love that. I love that. I came in and my mind was changed, and I'm growing and I'm learning, and that's for me is such a huge win. So I'm gonna, you guys, I stop saying that. You two, please, bring it all. I love you both, and this is so much joy. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, Paul, because it's one of the beautiful things about Canada Reads. Scott, yesterday you came in with one idea. Your mind was changed because of the passionate debate and championing of these books, and it's a beautiful thing to see. All right, well, that is it. 3 votes down. We've got only 1 vote left. The final 2 books are Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead and Butter Honey Pig Bread by Francesca Equiasi. Tomorrow, there will be just 1 book left standing, and it will be named the winner of the Great Canadian Book Debate. I'm your host, Ali Hassan. We're going to see you one last time tomorrow. Until then, read on, Canada.
Fantastic.
thank you.
If you're watching on TV or online, the show is not over. It's time for the Canada Reads After Show. We just had our 3rd Canada Reads elimination. We said goodbye to Hench today, It joined Two Trees, Make a Forest, and The Midnight Bargain. Yeah, today's elimination means there are 2 books left. That is Johnny Appleseed and Butter Honey Pig Bread. We've got some time left on the clock, so we're going to talk about what went down today, take questions from our online audience. Paul, you are in an interesting place. You are simultaneously disappointed, which your fellow panelists have said you should not be, but you are also, the relief is showing as well. I think you're simultaneously both things at the same time. Yeah.
It's tough when you have a genre novel, and I went through this last night. It was like, how do I defend? Because there's such deeply personal stories, and not to say that Hench isn't, and I love Natalie, and it is great sort of allegorical tale that I think is consumable for everybody. Everybody can relate to it, but there's one of the difficulties with having a genre novel is it doesn't get, people don't take it seriously enough to give it that weight, and I think there's some really great themes in here that should be considered. But when you have such a personal journey like Johnny Appleseed and with Butter Honey Pig Bread, like, again, 2 books that were just so on the opposite ends of the spectrum for me, but still very, very relevant. It's like having to climb Mount Everest without any ropes sometimes, right? And just using your guile and your wit to survive. And this is a great book to champion as well, because Natalie does a lot of heavy lifting for me. It's just, but it is, I'm not gonna lie, it's one of those moments where I'm like, okay, I can breathe because I feel like I've been sort of doing the Matrix and dodging these bullets and trying to get there. But yeah, no, thank you.
Well, as you can see from the tie that had to be broken today also, you did a great job championing it. And it wasn't an easy decision for your panelists, or not for most of them anyway. Let's take the stress a little bit out of this moment and go to a question that I have from Fiona Ross on YouTube. And Fiona asks, I would like to ask the panelists, what was the first book they read or remember reading as a child? I wouldn't have any memory of that. Do you remember, Devery?
I do. The first book that I read, and I say that in quotations because I was 2 years old, so I basically just memorized it. But every time I would go to my Duda's house in Kahnawake, like my grandmother's house, we would read that book together, and that was Brown Bear, what do you see? And that's one of her most vivid memories of me when I was young. And so she would quote me and how I'd say it, and it would be like, Brown Bear, what do you see? And so it was just like a really awesome memory that I have with my Duda.
That's interesting. I started reading it and I didn't realize there was more to the question. So you may have 2 questions. We may have 2 questions for you. The question was, first book that you remember reading as a child. The line I didn't see was, that opened your eyes. So, I mean, maybe Brown Bear did that as well. I don't know, but
Don't know about that one.
I know that J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, I just remember feeling like, is this allowed? Can people write like this?
Yeah.
This is so like, this is inside thoughts. Is this legal? Like, I remember thinking like, this is crazy that this is what literature can also be, as well as, so I do remember feeling that.
I wasn't that smart. For me, it was Black Panther comics.
Oh, yeah.
But for the first time ever, I was like, there could be a black superhero, like a black superhero in like a black world? Whoa! It just was just so incredibly powerful for my ego. Like, as a kid growing up, it's so
Book about superheroes, huh?
Yeah. That's not what I needed to hear.
Right, okay, I get it.
Rosie, what about you? Is there a book you remember?
Yeah, but not as a child, but a book that opened my eyes. I read it and I actually heard music. I actually heard rhythm and I felt rhythm. I never knew that anyone could write this way. It was a book called, and you may have heard of it, Invisible Man. Not The Invisible Man, not the sci-fi. Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison.
I know Ralph Ellison, sure.
Unbelievably lyrical, beautiful, and throughout the entire book, you don't know the guy's name because he's invisible.
Amazing.
To everyone but himself. And it's the struggle that he goes through. And when he eats the candy yam and starts dancing, it is so powerful that even Kendrick Lamar writes a rap about that part.
Okay.
Wow. And it just opened my eyes. And if you could read a book that just, you go, wait, what? What kind of, Oh, and it's truly there's music in every single word. I don't know how he constructed it, but I know that it opened my eyes to literature. And from there on, I went, oh, okay, I'm gonna read that book and that book and that book. I'm gonna take something out of every book. And so authors are absolute gems and geniuses. Like
I think calling them gems and geniuses in the last 30 seconds of our after show is a great way to wrap this up. And I think you gave some recommendations to people there unwittingly. Thank you for joining us today. We are one vote away from choosing the winner of Canada Reads 2021. Thank you to your panelists, Paul, Sun-Hyung Lee, Rosietta, Scott Hellman, Deborah Jacobs, and Roger Mooking. They'll all be back tomorrow. I'm Ali Hassan. This is Canada Reads.